Okay, so it's been a while since I didn't even do the math, but it's probably been 4 or 5 years since we've done a podcast together.
It's been a sec. Yeah, I would say probably. Didn't we do one? I think in 2000. Did we do one in 2019 or was that 2018? Yeah, it's probably been 4 years. That'd be 4 years.
Yeah, I'm gonna look it up right
The
now.
last one was with G Monk and them.
We did a group one, right?
Yeah, G Monk and with Albert Omos, was it?
I think so. Well, one of them we did that. We did a trifecta a while ago. Well, it's been a long time.
It was the last time. Yeah,
Yeah, it's been a long time. There's also been a lot of stuff that's happened since.
a couple things have happened since then.
Just a
A
couple
couple things
things.
have
Like
happened since then.
not even that big of a deal, but it's something to probably talk about, So to those that are like just now listening to the podcast or our conversations, I figured it would be actually good to kind of, and also people that have not been in that they don't know you very familiar, like they're not familiar with your work and your process and where you come from. I thought it'd be really cool to kind of talk about that a little bit to get us started. I have a bunch of questions about different topics, but could you tell people that aren't familiar with who you are, what you do, and kind of where you come from?
Sure. So my name is Mike Winklemann Beeple, aka I'm from Wisconsin, currently living in Charleston. And I am a digital artist who sold some of these newfangled NFTs that these kids are talking about.
I love it.
Kids with their non-fungible whatnots.
I was waiting how long until you'd make me giggle on this introduction. I lasted 15 seconds.
The Yeah, so I've been doing this like 20 years, but obviously in the last 2 years things got a bit wacky as the fucking NFT sort of boom happened. And so now I'm very much kind of like focused on making more art and trying to kind of like help educate the traditional art world about digital art and sort of like what goes into making it, uh, and sort of a bit more of the understanding of the craft behind it, because I think it's like it's made with computers. Like, well, that's okay. There's a lot of things made with computers. That's like super vague. But I don't think people have any idea beyond that it's like, oh, it's made with a computer. It's like,
the,
okay, well, that's like,
the general public and also educated public too. Right? Wouldn't you say?
yeah. I mean, I think you ask the average person, it's sort of like they just, why would they know this? How this stuff comes together? Like, it's not like, oh, you don't know this. Of course, you don't know this. Like, nobody, you've never really thought about it, and nobody's sort of like explained this, so it would make perfect sense that you don't sort of like understand how these images are made. um but like, this is the same, the sort of broad, very broad workflow that is, that I'm going through to make these images are the same way video games, art for video games is made, art for movies, art for TV shows.
Yeah.
And so, like, this sort of basic, kind of 3D workflow is used a lot, and people see it every day. They just don't know how that, Mario character was animated like that, or why does he look like that? What makes him look like that? Like, and so trying to like help educate people about sort of the production behind digital art and sort of like where the meaning is, because I think people see and they hear, oh, it was made with a computer. They don't understand the intention behind that, and they don't understand that just because it was made by a computer, there's ways to make things sort of good with the computer, and then there's ways to make things not so good, and sort of understanding, having a bit more understanding for the aesthetics and what makes something well made, and what is sort of like, wasn't made that great, that was kind of crap. Which again, if you don't have experience, like, I can't look at a painting, and unless it's like it's got to be a fucking masterpiece. Either it's a masterpiece or it's a total pile of shit.
In your
It,
opinion, right? Yeah.
for me to like, sort of be able to like have some like, okay, this painting is, good or whatever. But even the ones that are total piles of shit, like sometimes people are like, "Oh, that's great." So it's like then I have no fucking clue. But I think it's having some. I think people will develop this over time, having some sort of just more experience around digital art will help them to kind of see over time what's good, what's bad, what was well made, what was like poorly made,
Mm.
what has truly sort of like new concepts behind it, and what's sort of like, well, that's not really that new. That's like that was the thing everybody was doing in 2010. You just weren't around for it.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Because I think there's a lot of that. Like I see sometimes people doing things where it's like, yeah, that's not remotely new, but people haven't seen it in the sort of like space, so they don't know that.
Almost everything is some sort of remix, and that's the kind of the irony. We're going to get into this probably some more as well, as like the irony with AI art is it's basically a remix generator. And that's really interesting as well, because it's not really authentic, but then what is truly authentic? And that's a great point to when we talk about the subject of authenticity and when curation comes into this space, which I think is really interesting as well, like people that are non-creating artists observing and then getting a recollection of what has happened and transpired, and then therefore appointing potential values based on these kind of constructs of, I don't know, like what would you call like the scholastic approach to things, like studying things, understanding things, the presence of things. Art is so wild, and it's one of those like it's a dragon. It's like trying to chase a dragon almost. It's so elusive and it's constantly shifting and changing. But you touched on something we should talk about too. Before we do that, I've been making notes as we go. You had an art education. That's something that I think is no college, right? Your college
I
was
went
a
to school for
focus.
computer science.
Computer science. Okay, that's right. Yeah. That was something, but you didn't go for art focus. That's right. Okay. And that's something we talked about before as well. Like your approach to art, which I think is actually really great, is you don't have this kind of baggage of the past on your conscious approach to making your art, which I think makes it even more authentic. Does that make sense?
Well, I do know some art history now, so I feel
You
like I
do
have
now.
a
Yeah.
little baggage on me. I got a little bit of a history lesson here, but
Sure. But
yeah, I definitely don't know most of art history. I will still say that my knowledge of the space is still pretty elementary.
well, you could spend pretty much your whole life studying maybe a handful of artists and never really
Sure,
understand them. And that's a handful, meaning there's, I would say, hundreds of thousands of artists who have created pretty great work. Probably the top 0.1% of them has created brilliant work. And that's all still subjective, but can
sure.
be kind of chased down to be like, oh, this is actually relevant and good, socially relevant, and so on and so forth. But okay, cool. So the computer science thing, which I think makes a lot of sense, with what you're doing now, which is working with engineers and building really cool thoughts. Basically, you're thinking big and you're working with engineers and you're kind of creating these things, which is almost like this amalgamation of taking what's inside of your head. Forgive me if I'm jumping, but you're taking what's in your side of your head and then you're putting it out to the world, not just in a canvas form, but in an experiential form, or um, you're just chasing what it seems like you've always chased is your interests, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. It's definitely. I think that's what was sort of like ironic with when the NFT thing hit. It made me like, as the whole world was going, more digital. This made me uh, sort of like look a bit more at the like physical world and like, well, what are the things that could be done there, in terms of trying to make things items that feel very digital but are obviously physical objects. And so I think there's a lot of space there for digital artists to sort of like do things that kind of cross that boundary, and on the other side too, for traditional artists to do things that feel more digital. um and so yeah, that's what I've been kind of like focused on now. But I never really used the computer science degree. I feel like with this NFT stuff and understanding some of the sort of like technicalities behind it, it's definitely helped. But
Mm.
yeah, I would say this has probably been the closest that I've been to actually dusting that bad boy off and giving her use.
Well, yeah, I would say like because I had art education, but and for a long time I would say like that education didn't really influence my career. But I would when I like take a more humbled approach to it and I think about it, I go, I think it did. I just wasn't willing to acknowledge its like value. And I for whatever reason, because I wanted to validate my own choice of like being the school of internet or whatever or like feeling like I've learned a lot more from others and the internet and actually working on projects, and in real time as you do.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's because for me at least, I'm trying to go, okay, was that worth my time and effort? And then I go, well, shit, I just learned the equivalent of that lesson in a video because I was willing to take it in though too. So that's a difference as well. When you're learning on a project that there's a certain weight to it, you put a lot more emphasis on understanding it, and then
Yeah.
applying it. And the education isn't just a lesson, it's actually like your livelihood. So
Yeah.
and that makes
Well, I think it's like very true of all of college that you learn so much. You can only learn so much in 4 years, and especially when those 4 years happen to be between 18-year-old, 18 and 22.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is
Yeah.
it's arguably a very stupid time for most people.
That's an arguably, I can tell you that was a pretty stupid time in my life. So
I think we're just getting out of that now.
yeah,
We're getting
like maybe
closer.
like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago. Yeah. You
Yeah.
didn't even mention your everydays in your intro. Like,
Oh yeah.
and that, before all of this stuff that's happened to your life, and we'll get into that too, but the everydays was kind of like the encompassing thing of what you stood for in the artist community, right? Could you explain to people that aren't familiar with what an everyday is?
Sure. So the Everydays were a project I started in 2007, May 1st, 2007. It's still going now. I've got to do my picture after this call. And so it's basically one picture done sort of from start to finish each day. The last few years have been using Cinema 4D and Octane, a 3D animation program. But it's basically just a picture that I sit down at the computer each day, make and post online before midnight.
Mm.
And over the years, I've sort of like the style of them has changed. They were very abstract for a long time. And now they're much more sort of like narrative, and sometimes they're kind of like based on the sort of like news of the day. Yeah, and that's kind of where they're at. And then for people who really don't know, one of them sold for I kind of made a compilation of them last year, and that sold for a couple bucks.
Just a couple bucks. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We'll get in. Okay. So, yeah, the everydays. And what's cool is when my wife and I came and visited Mike and his amazing compound. I don't even, what would you call this place?
We're going to call it the Space.
The Space. Okay. That's actually a perfect, because it's got multiple things to it, and we won't get into that. But when I was in that one room and you had your everydays represented physical and they're different varied size, and there's like this big collage, it was so cool to see because we've known each other for about 10 years. You've been doing everydays for 15, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did we have them up on the wall when you were here?
In that room, not in the other one, but in the like the meeting room where we had lunch.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I see. Yeah.
And it was cool to like note a lot of them, but to bring it back to what you're saying is your everyday started as a device in your life, as I understand it, to be creative and to give time to being creative. Correct?
Yeah, it's definitely, well, it started out to get better, and it started out to get better actually at drawing. And so the first year is drawings, just because I wanted to sort of get better much quicker. And I saw an illustrator in the UK named Tom Judd who did a sketch a day, and I thought, oh, that's a cool idea. Like I could do a sketch a day, and
Yeah.
that would really help me sort of like incrementally improve and kind of stick with this over a long time. And then after that year was done, then I realized I'd always wanted to learn a 3D program. And so I realized, I could do a render every day, and sort of like that might be a good way to sort of like learn this program.
This is Cinema 4D. Yeah.
This was Cinema 4D, yeah.
This is
And I
before
think
Octane was a
this
device
is,
that was
yeah, way
programmed.
before Octane. This was like 2008. So this was like probably almost 6 years, 5, 6 years before I started using Octane.
Mm-hmm. When we say Octane, just so people understand this, is there's a 3D program which you can model and build and make awesome things, which is Cinema 4D. Inside that, there's a proprietary software that is also like what we call a plugin that attaches itself into the program, which renders things in a very photorealistic way, and that's Octane. So,
yeah, and the rendering is sort of like the final kind of like calculation of the image that takes into account the materials, the lights, the atmosphere, everything in the scene, and then it produces a final, like, sort of like much, much higher quality sort of like simulation of that scene with all those lights and everything.
Yeah.
And so depending on the resolution and the like quality, that can take, I mean, it could take hours just to make one sort of
Sometimes
like
days.
the frames that you see in like these movies of, Pixar, whatever, those take like a day or 2 days for one single sort of like image, the final render on them, just because they're like doing super complex calculations on the light that takes an insane amount of math to make things sort of like photorealistic.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Octane is the renderer that is used for this.
This is a game changer. You introduced me actually to Octane, and that changed my whole game as well. So I have you to thank for me getting further into like my obsession with CGI and 3D and all that kind of stuff. And
oh yeah, I remember when Octane first came out. It was one of those things where I still remember the first video I saw with it, and it was like, okay, wait, so this is on the GPU? This seems way faster. And this was like nobody was using this at the time. Yeah. It was like,
do you remember who made the video? Yeah.
And the video was just like a tech demo of like a tube of toothpaste getting like some shit on it, like toothpaste on it or something.
Shit on the toothpaste? Like, oh man.
Nobody was using this at the time. This was late 2013.
Oh damn. Okay.
And it was like, man, this seems like way fucking faster. And it's like, if I spend like $3,000, I could get like 3 of these cards, and this thing's gonna be like stupid.
The 720s? 720s?
Those are 720s.
Yeah, baby, that old school GTX, baby.
And so it was like,
we're talking about graphics processor units, GPUs. That's what actually helps calculate the math and the science that goes behind the engineering.
Before that, they used CPUs, and so it would calculate on the CPU. And this was like a big change.
Yes.
To calculate the image using a GPU.
Yeah. I use CPU renders now, and I use GPU, so I use both. I use a plugin called Corona, and there's one that they do similar things, very similar, just different ways of interacting. And then Octane is a GPU based. So just so we're not losing anybody here that comes in and wants to know about.
No, I think this is good.
But it's really important because like these are literally our paintbrushes. If you look at the equivalent, like this is, a lot of people, myself included, loved watching, like looking at Da Vinci's sketches. Well, what did he sketch with? The reason why I think we can relate to that is we all understand paper and graphite makes a sketch. It's simple. It's easy. We understand it. The big fallout with everything else that we do is like, what the hell is an NFT? What's Bitcoin? What is that? What's a GPU? What's Octane? There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff to take in as an outside observer, and there's a lot of responsibility almost if you want to understand this space. That's one thing I really admire about you and various friends, that you guys are very early adopters to a lot of technology. And I think that gives you guys the edge. I'm very slow to react to certain things. Like, I don't know what my problem is. I think I'm just like very hesitant, and then I'm like, all right, this is cool.
I feel like I'm pretty slow too, because I usually take the like sort of, especially with new technologies, I'm interested right away.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, kind of like, okay, like, let's take a like wait and see approach before I like put a bunch of time into this.
Well, we talked about that with AI art. We've had quite a few. We should definitely get into that topic in general, but like that's a thing that's new that we've both discussed at pretty good length about like if these things are relevant or not, like relevant, of course, but how would we use them and apply them outside of like the knee-jerk reaction of like, this is a cool toy, like how can this be used thoughtfully? But yeah, no, I guess, Yeah, I think you do early adopt things too. At least from my perspective, I feel like I'm much slower. A lot of friends of mine, they just jump in and they get in there like Vitali or Miche, and those guys just get right into it and start jamming through things, which is really cool. I have a lot of admiration for that because I'm almost afraid of it. I'm like, I don't want to learn another thing. Like
Sure.
Blender's now like the program killer, and then there's like obviously real-time renders via game engines. We've talked about that Unreal Engine, the version 5. When we say
Yes,
this,
I'm not using that. I'm way behind.
yeah,
I feel like some things I'm quick to, but it's got to be like I have to see like an insane amount of like immediate value from it to
mhm,
like immediately sort of like switch over.
yeah,
And with the NFT thing, it finally kind of like clicked where it's like, wait a second,
mm,
this could be that moment that people actually start like well before the like Christie's auction. Like I kind of realized this could be that moment that people start looking at this as actual collectible art and it is in the canon of art history in a much more meaningful sort of like way.
let's okay. So now let's go back a little bit because we talked about the everydays, the Christie's thing. We're going to definitely talk about that's lightning in a bottle kind of situation for you. That's also incredible. It's a big deal, obviously very relevant. But I also this I want our talk to be focused around as much of the art as possible because I feel like that's how
Sure.
we're going to get the most. Because I know that a lot of your talks and things that I know I've seen you experience is it's like your art is synonymous with the value, which is understandable. But before all this, you're an artist. After all this, you're an artist. Between it
Yeah.
all, you're an artist. So, which I find that's really where the core is. And I know that's where Metacoven saw it too, the person
Yeah.
that bid and actually purchased your work, which is really great. Um, so let's go back a little bit. You're doing these things called everydays. As we understand them, they're a thing that you do every day. You finish it before 12 o'clock. I mean, I remember when your kids were being born and you're still doing every days and stuff, like it became a thing. And another thing that I love as an observer of this and a friend of yours is like seeing how positive an impact it's had on the community. Like it's kind of evolved you and the community as one movement, which has been really great.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's definitely been something that I've tried to sort of like, okay, this worked for me to sort of like get a lot better. It's pretty like if you look at kind of the like skill set and the like work that I was putting out before and after every day, it's pretty dramatic. So I very much this is something where that I've encouraged other people like, hey, if you're looking to get better or looking to like put out more work, you might want to do this. So kind of at talks all around the world, I've sort of was trying to get people to take a look at this and sort of thousands of people did start doing everydays and they became very very popular for a second there that there was kind of a bit of a backlash where it was sort of like, oh, you're doing everydays, everybody's doing
Yeah. Yeah, but it's
which is
cool. You're
funny
just making
because
stuff. Yeah.
I always knew that would not last. It's like, well, we'll see how many of these people are doing them fucking 3 years from now because again,
Yeah. It's a 3 to 5 year thing. Like, because
it's a
you
lot of fun.
understand, like, when you do something, if you don't have a core intention of it, it's not going to last because the work's really hard. You're going to sit there in front of an empty crowd and nobody's going to care about you and appreciate you. So you got to do it for you and only
Yeah,
you. And it's kind of a selfish act, like making art
yeah.
for yourself. It's very masturbatory. Unless it's like it's designed for the masses. But because you were doing that, you were kind of a beacon because I feel like, in my opinion, and I know you've experienced this well as like if you encounter like say a stranger and they say, "Oh, I used to draw," or "I used to be an artist." How many times have you encountered that?
Yeah.
I mean, so many people. I'd say like 1 out of 5 people has told me the same thing. "Oh, you're an artist? Oh, I used to do it in school." And I'm like, I always tell them like, "Why did you stop?" And then they have you as an example, like, "Hey, I started here. I kept working at it." And it's almost like there's no excuse if you work at it every day. You're not going to make a masterpiece every day. You're going to have some shit ones and some great ones, and then it's going to evolve. I just think it's fascinating and crazy, and also like a kind of a great case study of just like not being a typical artist, like being self-deprecating and not finishing things, but
Well, I
actually,
think, yeah, one of the things I really like about the like project overall is that you can see the entire sort of like history of this.
Yeah.
Are you frozen?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay. The video froze.
I'm a Disney musical.
What's that?
I'm a Disney musical. I'm frozen.
The
Dad joke.
you can kind of see the whole sort of arc of this, and you can see me literally the first day I opened up Cinema 4D when I could make literally nothing but cubes to the point where I'm now where I can make Madonna vaginas.
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 This is another auction piece, by the way, for those that aren't familiar.
That is.
Yeah, that was taking it to the extreme there, Mikey. Yeah, I was like, what the hell?
that one got away from us. But yeah, I think it's to me, it is such a great tool for people who are looking to improve on something, and it can be applied to so many different things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really about just like putting in a small amount of like incremental time. But if you do that 365 days a year, it will add up to much more than like, I'm going to fucking learn this whole thing this weekend. And then you get burned out and then you fucking really end up spending, 15 hours and then you never come back to it. Yeah. Versus if you just spent 1 hour and for 15 days, you'd have as much time and you'd have time to process and thinking about it in between versus just trying to like cram through something in a short amount of time. So it's really very, very much about the process.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, that was definitely something that got lost in all the NFT stuff. Was there was just kind of like a glossing over like, oh yeah, this picture is just like a picture, a collage of all the pictures you made over the last 5,000 days. Okay. that was kind of a lot of work there.
No, Mike, that was bullshit.
Gloss over like these are.
It's just a JPEG, dude. I could screenshot it. And I own it.
Everybody's seen this. Okay.
Well, I think that was what was really fascinating about it. If we talk about the Christie's auction, for example, like Metacoven, as I understand it, is the person that purchased the work. And I think from what I understood from listening to what he was saying is that he wanted to acquire the thing in which he could not acquire, which was what you were doing, which was making work every day, documenting it socially, politically, not politically, but publicly. And there's no denying that you're the one that made it. You've been making it nonstop for this much time. There's a value in that because of the way you've been doing it. In my mind, there's a couple of things to talk about with the everydays. Is most people were often very short-sighted. We want the goal, we want the result from not working, and we also want the result as quick as possible. But we don't realize that that's actually the solve. When I did jujitsu, it's all about the amount of times you do the reps. You want to just roll and get crazy, but that's not where you learn. Where you really get good is you do the reps, and that's the hardest part. Even like with I'm into cycling stuff. Like these people win, they don't blast. They go steady, nice steady pace, and they slowly overcome and they just beat everybody because they have that slow consistency. And that slow consistency is not really sexy. It's not romantic, but it is when you take 5,000 of those bad boys and put it up for auction. That's sexy, So
it's definitely. I think it is very much about sort of slowly, incrementally improving. But I think it's also about sort of the fear that people have each day of that blank page, which is very real. And it's something I experience. I know that fear.
You don't experience it anymore, right?
What's that?
You don't experience it now, right?
I don't experience it with the everydays, but I do experience it with other projects.
Oh, really?
Just sort of like, oh, Jesus Christ, how the fuck am I going to start this thing? I want to make this, seemingly massive project. It's like, I don't even know where to fucking begin and what if it's stupid and blah, blah, blah. It's like the everydays remove a lot of those challenges to making work because one, you have a very set deadline today, the end of the fucking day.
Yeah.
That is the biggest thing. And I think there's no time to that deadline forces you to just make choices. There's no time to be like, is this good? Is this not good? Are people gonna like this? What does this say about me? Is this my best work? It's like all those things are just shit that you fucking tell yourself to so that your body badly wants you to not sit down and work, which is very it's weird that that's how our bodies are kind of like our bodies and our minds. They just don't want to think. They don't want to do any work. And
Unless
it's
you're
about
aligned with the pursuit. You know how that is when you're aligned with the pursuit of something and that chase, but it's not long lasting.
it's not long lasting, and it takes a lot of sort of like motivation. And I'm not like, I think that's the other misconception people have about me. I think they think I'm like, oh, this guy who's super disciplined. He's been doing this, blah, blah. No, that's not the case. I am not
You're
super
pretty disciplined though, I think. I would say. You're well
I
organized.
I
I'm saying the
personally would not
spectrum of
think
artists, you know, like usually artists are very nebulous and weird and they're just all over the place and spazzy. Like you have those traits, but they're much more limited. I feel like you definitely have, you're very professional. I think it could also potentially be because you come from the professional art background, right? Because before
yeah,
all this too, you were doing like, you know, Super Bowl stuff and like concert visuals and stuff like that, due dates and things that needed to be done. And, you know, that's a discipline act to actually fulfill those goals, right?
yeah, I think I mean, obviously for, 15 years or so, actually more than that, probably almost 20, that I did professional work. I was a web designer, and then I did concert visuals and all kinds of like other freelance work. But yeah, it was sort of like you had to be a professional. It's like you have deadlines,
Yeah.
you have a brief. These things are not like suggestions. This is the fucking thing they're paying you to do.
Yeah.
You need to do this shit. So yeah, I mean, I think compared to like if you have somebody who's, I don't know, does not have those constraints as like was always a traditional artist,
Mm.
and sort of didn't have a, quote unquote real job. I think, yeah, you might have less of that. But I think, again, sort of to my original point, like, I'm not some dude who gets up every morning and, I'm going to go fucking run 10 miles. And, oh, okay, I'm going to fucking eat 6 pounds of chicken for the week and fucking 22 milligrams of fucking
Oh,
this.
shit.
And, like,
You sound like a closet workout guy. Let's see
you
that
know,
guy. Take that shirt off. Let's see those abs.
I'm gonna read fucking 15 books this month, or I'm gonna teach myself how to fucking speak Spanish or something. And that's all shit. That shit is not me, man. I fucking make a picture every day. That's
Yeah, you got a lot going on, dude. You got
everything else is fucking like I'm just lucky if it gets done. Like, and so
you have great people surrounding you too. That was one thing I really loved to see when we were out there. I was telling my wife, I was like, I love that you surround yourself with loved ones and people that you've known for a long time and people that support you and you support them. It seemed like it was a very symbiotic, because it gets really weird.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about that when the Christie's auction happened. Like, I was like, oh shit, like, are you ready for this? Because things are about to flip upside down. So like, hold on to like whatever you can, because it's going to get really weird, you know?
Yeah, it definitely, I think that's very true. But I think even more than that, even more than having like a support system, I think, looking at the everydays and sort of, if it is something that you want to stick with, I think it's about creating sort of a realistic expectation for each day and how much you're going to learn and the quality of work that you're going to put out in 3 hours. Because I think that's what's very deceiving with these tools. To me, you spend 2-3 hours on something, that's a sketch.
Mhm.
Like that's a sketch.
Yeah.
But with these tools now, you can make work that does not look like a sketch. It looks quite detailed and quite like finished. But it did not take that long because the tools are insanely powerful now.
Yeah.
And they're just set up that it's just like pure artistic choices.
Well, there's an abundance of assets too. We should talk about the assets, because there's asset armies. There's these things on websites called like Turbo Squid and CG Trader and these things where we can literally buy, like going to a grocery store and it has everything that you could ever want for the most part, probably like 90% of what you would want if it was just an object that was obtained from reality. I'm not talking about imagination stuff. You usually have to build those, but so when we talk about things being very quick, there's many different avenues as a digital artist in which you can grab assets and use them in a very fast manner. Instead of having to draw a chair, you're like, oh shit, I have 5,000 options here. I can just buy one, or I have an asset library plugged into Cinema, and I just blast through it on the content browser.
Yeah.
Kind of blended.
Well, and when you're talking about these assets, so basically what those are is 3D models. So like in the case of a chair, you're buying a 3D model of a chair. So you're buying kind of like a virtual chair, and you can do anything you want with that chair. You can make it bigger, you can make it smaller, you can knock the legs off, you
put
can
Yeezy's head on it.
You could put Yeezy's head on it. And so it's like this 3D object that you have complete control over. Change the materials of it. And so by and that's just one sort of like asset. Again, there's any object you can think of, there's a 3D model of this, or multiple 3D models of it that you can kind of art direct what sort of like style I wanted this. So these asset libraries only existed, I would say, in the last 10 years at the sort of like scale that they're at now.
It got crazy now. I think the last 5 years is just like, wow.
I would say
better. Like Megascans, for example, like the Megascans library is insane. And now MetaHuman's coming out. It's like, oh my God, it's getting huge. And what we say by Megascans is it's actually it's a company, right? Megascans? What used to be Pixel, now
Unreal bought them. Epic bought them.
Epic as a game studio or game, and they bought this massive photo scan like asset library that you can just grab certain pieces and put it in there. But keep in mind, when we say this, it's not like you can just be the master of art really quickly by just slapping all these things together. You actually definitely have to understand composition. You have to definitely understand lighting, material, and then you have to become a technical artist. What I mean by that is you have to understand when shit goes wrong, because it always goes wrong. Nothing ever works as it should, and that's just digital art. I would say 50% of my time is spent going, what the fuck? Why are you doing the thing that I told you to do? So but then when it does work, you're like, okay, great, this is actually very frictionless, and it's actually like no crashing and so on and so forth. So but I think it's a very mentally taxing thing. Do you encounter that? I feel like digital
mentally taxing how?
For at least for me, is like when I go into a situation where I'm like, okay, I want to get this done at this time, and I'm expecting this result from myself, and everything is aligning to that success happening in that time frame. It almost never does, and then I'm just like, why is it not happening? And that's more of an expectation and a problem like that. And usually because my timelines are really short, or I want things done faster than that's actually like physically possible. So yeah, I'm like, you do a 3 hour every day? Wow, crazy. Yeah, I want that.
Yeah, I think it's like sometimes, I would say most of the time, it comes out not as good as I expected, but not that far off.
That's good.
Sometimes, I would say most of the time. But I think I've also sort of like, I know what I can do and what I can't do. And I'm always trying to push myself a little, but not so much that it's like, well, of course that didn't fucking work. I know I can't draw XYZ, or I know I can't comp together whatever, and it's just not gonna look that good. And so I kind of have a good sort of like understanding of where the sort of like boundaries are and how I can push them a little, but not go so far outside of my sort of like boundary where it's like, well, that's just a total fucking pile of shit. Like,
so you curb your enthusiasm. I think that's actually not a bad idea. Like, learn a little bit, but it's that turtle versus the hare kind of approach, where it's like slow incremental growth rather than trying to leap too far and then spaz out. And
Well, I think a lot of the things too that it's sort of like the things that I really don't know how to do, I'm not that interested in, or I would learn how to do them.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's sort of like, and my interest, I think too, my interests have changed so much over the years that it's like some things I could do before, I don't even remember how to do them, or it would certainly take like some like getting used to kind of like get back in that mode, which I'm sure is for you. Like I don't know how much like UI stuff you do now, like
Yeah.
you used to do a lot of UI stuff, and
Mhm.
like that like mindset is just sort of
It's
like
like getting on a
gone.
bike, I think. Yeah, but it does go away. It's a muscle, and your body reacts to
You could
whatever
do
you.
it if you had to, but it's just like I think it's tough if you just don't if you're not in that mindset anymore.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's and this is to talk about mindset? Do you think that there's like a champion mindset that you've acquired through like the attrition war that you've gone through with making art every day? Do you feel like you can get into that master mindset, like where it's like, okay, curbing my enthusiasm, I have this approach, I have this much time, this is how much I can extract from it, this is how far out I want to go up beyond my means. Do you approach it like that, or do you think it just kind of comes natural?
I think it comes natural, and I think it's like I think that's where the everydays come in hand is you don't really have to have if you just commit to doing it,
Hmm.
you don't really need a champion mindset. Like you
Yeah.
just need to fucking do it. And like, you'll just sit down and do it if you're like, I'm gonna do this every day. And there's a very clear, either you posted it or you didn't. And
Yeah.
so I don't think you necessarily need a like champion sort of like mindset. I think um I mean, I definitely do not feel like I have some sort of like champion mindset. I can tell you that.
Well, I know you're very self-deprecating and very humble, so which is also really good. And I think that's also part of what your charm is to me as a distant observer and a friend of yours is like you don't take yourself all that seriously, but you are very, well accomplished, and there's a lot, it's like this interesting amalgamation which makes you who you are, which I think is fascinating. You talked about misconceptions or misunderstandings. You said that people think that you're just self-disciplined, like constantly working. What other misunderstandings do you think people have of you and your work?
Well, I am constantly working. It's just like I don't feel super self-disciplined with it. I think one of the other probably misconceptions, especially from the traditional art space, is I don't think people understand that a lot of the work and the imagery that I'm choosing is very purposefully immature. Um,
Mhm.
and that is, in my opinion, a um, it's a tone and it is a sort of vibe that I don't see that much, or I don't really see in traditional art that much. It feels very to me very kind of like stuffy and very humorless. And if there is humor, it's much more like kind of like snarky,
Mhm.
and sort of like uh, very I don't know, not condescending, but
Pretentious?
yeah, pretentious and very I don't know, just it's not something that is more like it's not the vibe of the internet. I don't know. It's hard to put, but like the vibe of the internet is much more like to me, it's much more like super weird and bizarre and like kind of immature in a way.
Kind of
Um,
very immature.
and so that's what I'm trying to capture with the art. I'm trying to make something that is the vibe of the internet itself.
Mm.
Um,
And I heard you say that. That's actually makes a lot of sense about your work in general, like how you're kind of taking what you're observing through the internet, which is honestly, the internet, in my opinion, is one of the most fascinating human social experiments of all time. Nothing tops that because it's fucking weird. Let's look at like Twitter, for example. Like, take human interaction and distill it down to the most core aspect and create a shit ton of misinformation and misalignment between people. Really, that's really what that, and Twitter, in my opinion, is the weirdest social experiment of all of them. Maybe Reddit too, but then you have long form like YouTube, which I think is very successful because it has more dimension to it and it has this aspect to it, which is more connected to the human condition, basically. But yeah, what's your
I
thoughts
think
on? Sorry, go ahead.
I think that is like social media in general. I think that is another thing that people sort of like, again, coming from the traditional art world, that don't sort of like understand about me as well, is that sort of it seemingly kind of came out of nowhere with this, and there's a big sale, and then everybody sort of like learned about me, but like millions of digital artists and sort of people who follow my work knew about me before this, and that's why this happened. I think they think that it's sort of like I gained this following through this like NFTs. It's like, no, I had a following before NFTs. That's what allowed me to be very successful in NFTs. And I've grown this sort of like huge base of people following the work and doing everydays and using we didn't even talk about the VJ clips, using the VJ
clips,
project files from the short film.
That's one thing I wanted to mention too, and sorry to interrupt, but that was one of the big things that Mike was doing that I think no one was really doing, which was he would make these massive files and have all these assets and things that he would do on his own time, release them as everydays or VJ clips, and then he would release the project files, which is basically like, here is everything that I've just made. And that was a very, I thought that was really amazing. I somehow ran into it when back in the day and on your Beeple crap website. And it was like, that's so wild that you have this approach. And it makes a lot of sense that you have had the success you've had because you've been so forthright and so honest and open with people. And it just, like, your approach to art in general is very, you're right. It's not stuffy. It's like, it has humor in it and it's you and your reactions to the world. And it's like, I think that's really, in my opinion, I think that's really special. And that's a good lesson to all artists and younger ones coming up. It's like, follow your own journey and just do your own thing, like, and
I think it's because it's this weird mix of like not taking yourself too seriously, but also taking what you are doing extremely seriously. Like, there was an incident earlier this year on a certain television show, not to be named. Damn you, Jimmy Fallon, you son of a bitch. No.
What happened?
No, so the everyday is like missing the everyday of that day.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Long story short, I kind of,
because you're making out the host or something. I forgot.
Kind of missed an everyday or whatever.
Tonguing
that
each other.
I forgot to post it before midnight, the day of the Jimmy Fallon show or whatever.
Yeah.
But I was like devastated. I was like so disappointed in myself and so just like, I just felt like a complete fucking failure. And it was like very hard. And
you missed the everyday that day?
What's up?
Because you missed the 12 o'clock deadline?
I just missed posting it. I did long story short, I did the picture on the Tonight Show, live on the Tonight Show or whatever. And then I wasn't going to post it because I didn't want to sort of like post it hours before the show even aired. And so I was going to wait till, right before midnight to post it. And then I was staring at myself being on TV and forgot to post it before midnight.
That's a good reason. And to be fair, you made the art before. So
I did make the art before. But there again, like everybody was just like, well, you made the art before. It doesn't, what about time zones? What about this or that?
Yeah,
like,
true.
Don't.
Yeah, but you have your own system.
I have the system, and it's like, and I know nobody else gives a fuck about this system, but I care very deeply about this system.
Yeah. It's your
because
thing.
I'm the one doing this work every single day. So it would make sense that I care more than anybody else. And so I think that's what's tough is sort of like taking your work very seriously, but maybe not taking yourself so seriously. Maybe that's it.
Yeah. That's tough.
Because I think the level of pretentiousness in the art world and with most artists is just so ridiculously high that it's just like, oh my God, I don't even like if I met another person, they're like, I'm an artist, I'd just be like, yeah, pass. I don't want to talk to you.
To be completely honest, you know why I think that's so prevalent, if I experience it myself, is that art is subjective and people are trying to, at the best of their ability, to prove that they're valid. So they'll go and do this weird charade and they'll do that and they won't realize that, like, if you, I can see right through that, you can see right through that. Most people can. And that's when contemporary art and a lot of art itself becomes completely void and disconnected from the human experience. And that's a real big, weird problem. And that's why there's this big valley between normal humans and the art space and the fine art space. And the fine art space is an ecosystem, as you know, as I'm getting to know. It's a complete, it's own, it's almost like the Hollywood movie machine. It's almost like the same close knit, got a lot of social aspects to it. There's definitely gatekeepers. It's like any network of humans, and
Yep.
it's hard to navigate. Honestly, it's hard to tell. Like, are you full of shit? Are you real? What do you do? Who's your boss? Like it's basically the same thing. It's like navigating that. But I think that's why artists are like that. That's the byproduct of this weird psychological system, which is like, I'm valid because I said so, and I have this weird excuse, and people go, well, that's weird, like,
Yeah.
and it's not, it's hard to calculate, and
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't. That could be. I mean, it's
that's one of the
definitely
things I think.
the art world is definitely its own sort of like crazy environment with, yeah, everything you're saying, its own kind of set of rules and norms, and these are very much rooted in history and tradition because again, this has been happening for thousands of years.
Yeah,
But I think it's yeah, I don't know. Maybe that is why. I don't know what makes artists so pretentious. I think it's
I think it's
just
that, honestly, it's the insecurity to have value. I think it's that.
maybe it could be. I don't
Because
know.
they're trying to overcompensate. Whenever you try to overcompensate, it's because there's a lack of something, and you're doing it. And when you do it so abruptly and so like blatantly, you're like, obviously you're trying to cover up for something, and that's potentially due to the fact that you really don't know what the fuck you're doing, and that's okay. But we can
Well,
see.
I think that could be. Maybe that's it. That's actually a very interesting theory because I mean, in essence, no artist really kind of knows what they're doing that much. They're
No.
just making up shit. Like it's like I mean, literally, I've got to do my picture today. I'm literally just going to make up some shit for this picture. I mean, what are we talking about? That's what it is. Like that's what making art. I'm literally just like just make up some bullshit and hopefully people like it. Hopefully I like it. Like that's it. And so this whole like, oh, you're just making it up. It's like, yeah, no, that's all art is. All art is just making up shit.
Yeah, and some are really, like, I've noticed that too about the artist ecosystem in the fine art space and in the NFT space. Is some artists are so good at the bullshit game, and some artists are really not good at the bullshit game, and some artists
And
are.
yeah, some artists who are literally like their ideas are not new, not original. If
Yeah.
you're great at bullshit, you will be very fucking successful.
Yeah,
Versus you could be the most talented artist who's genuinely doing new, innovative ideas.
Mhm.
But if you are not good at fucking marketing yourself, you're fucked.
Yeah, we talked a lot about that too. Let me put that in the marketing. Yeah, because we talked about that because we talked a bit about when this whole shift happened, and we were talking about how this was moving over, and it was like, oh, it was the death of client work. Like, wow, cool. Finally, we can be sovereign and have like an artist community and the collectors and this whole ecosystem and all that stuff. Seems like that was a lifetime ago, honestly, almost. But then we would talk, and I would say it's so exhausting because you have to do double time work because you're doing everything at this point now. You're not only the artist, but you're the communicator to your marketplace, which is marketing, and you have this whole slew of work that you have to do in order to champion yourself. Which, so to a lot of people that are looking at you and your success, or other people in the space that their success, it's not by accident.
Well, no, it's not by accident too, because one, I understood like social media.
Yeah.
And I understood the like power of like reaching a bunch of people. And I was trying to reach a bunch of people, um, not to sell them something. And I think that's the thing that is very sort of like different is I gained all these followers for many years
By giving your art away too.
by just giving my art away and sort of like
entertaining
providing
people.
value entertaining people
Yeah.
each day, not every day being like, buy my this, buy my that, buy
Yeah,
my
that's
this.
a disingenuine. Yeah.
And it's sort of like um, doing that marketing of myself is what put me in this position. And so, like, I was, marketing myself kind of like long before this and understanding that if I built up a sort of like massive amount of people following my work and familiar with my work, that would add value to it.
Mhm.
Um, and this is again something that's very new. The ability to be able to do something
So
like
new.
this. This
Yeah.
is 10 years. I mean, this is since the beginning of Facebook. This is not that long.
Yeah, being able to basically become a channel of your own, which is I think is really significant. And again, thanks to you for championing this conversation as a perfect example, because you and I have been talking a lot about we need curation in this space. We need to actually have these thoughtful conversations. And I kept beating around the bush, but I didn't want to bring back the podcast because I'm like, it's so much work. It's so much mental drain in order to do it right and do it properly. But you're like, you literally just need to do the podcast again, which is true. I think that ultimately that was the right answer. And doing this again, and thankful to have friends and support and family that are just like, you just need to do this, like it's something that it's dear to me. I love these conversations. I feel like hopefully it gives value to everybody involved. It gives you time to think about what the hell you're doing, helps me understand you more, and then also the community at large. You talked about validation. I feel like you're having to champion your validation more so now than ever. What does that feel like, and what are the things that why do you feel you have to validate so much more?
I think I do feel like that.
Mm.
I think I feel like that more because people are. I think there was such a massive separation between the traditional art world and the digital art world. I mean, it was just they were just, you don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what the fuck you're doing, and we're just gonna keep it that way. And that's how it was up until 2 years ago,
Two
when a
years
year and
ago.
a half, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think uh, for me now, I think a lot of people in the digital art world think, oh, well, we're in Christie's, we're in blah blah blah, we made it. It's like,
Mm.
not really. We've started. We've started to make it.
You feel like that
Uh,
door is closed or slightly open? Where's that door at?
Definitely much more open, and it's opening. I will say it's opening faster than I thought.
Mm.
Um,
You're talking about the fine art world embracing digital art as a sovereign part of our
I
history.
think it's like more like this being just seen as like another medium. That it's just like, oh, yep, digital art is just another medium similar to sculpting, and people like have
Photography.
maybe at least some understanding of how these things are made, and sort of like some level of kind of like appreciation that when you say you use the computer to make that, you didn't just like, here's the thing. It took a lot of like technical training and like understanding of a bunch of the properties that other people like. I mean, to use these renders, you have to understand light and materials in a way that a sculptor does, in a way that, you know what I mean? And you have to understand.
Photographer. Yeah.
You have to understand composition and lighting in a way that a photographer does. And if you're doing any sort of like paint over thing, like, you have to understand values and sort of like techniques of painting if you're going to be doing any sort of like, painting over as well. So you really need to understand a lot of the different concepts of these other mediums.
Mhm.
And so kind of like understanding that these things are not just, you know, monkey JPEGs to gamble on.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Talking about bored apes here? He's shooting in the air here? Oh,
And
okay.
so I think it's one of these things where
That's a different
we're
thing.
really at the beginning of that.
Yeah.
People are curious about this stuff more, and I think some people who have taken the time to look into it understand it and are much more thoughtful about this. But I think
Yeah.
in general, we still have quite a ways to go before the general public sort of like understands and
Mhm.
kind of like appreciates this thing in the same way that a painting. You see a painting, I still think it's a little bit more sort of like second class, like, oh, okay, that's cute. You made some digital art. So this real thing, this painting, like it's still seen as like, not quite. It's like I feel like it's like art junior in a lot of people's eyes.
Well, I can see that. And, think about and say in culture, how long films and visual effects has been in our zeitgeist, right? And you know, people don't know how that stuff is done. They just don't. It's not Norman. It's not normal. Like then, the terms like green screen came to be known. People are like, "Oh, is that the green screen?" And then
Yeah.
that's a comment. Oh, Photoshop that. What do you mean photo? That's manipulating an image using a program. And
Yeah.
and all these things. These are terms and stuff that people had to champion by saying like, "No, this is what I'm doing here," and so on and so forth. I think it's a war of attrition, honestly. I think it's a
Yeah, it'll take a while, but
yeah.
this is not a new sort of like process.
No,
Again, like I
no.
think photography is the best example that
Most
photography
relevant.
existed for, you know, almost 100 years
Yeah.
before we're truly seen as part of the like, canon of art history. And so I definitely think we'll get there. It's not going to take 100 years. It's going to take
No.
far more time than that.
I think that's because of the exchange of information and the validation of things,
Oh,
and
so
people
much
that have wealth that because at this point when it comes to fine art, it's literally people of wealth and culture who are supporting and championing a lot of these things and these big movements. It's like, oh, I believe in this. I'm going to put my money into this, and yeah, I come from a traditional arts, and this is something I do when I do a lot of studio visits with people from the fine art world. I bring them into my computer basically, and I explain like I come from being able to paint oil and acrylic and gouache and draw charcoal and sculpt and stuff. Having moved to the digital art space, I would say in complete honesty, digital art is 100 times harder, in my opinion, in many ways in different aspects because you're literally doing everything. When you have to do everything, it's so much. When you're dimensionalizing things, when you're moving things, and you're animating things, everything can go wrong and right at the same time. It's so much more abstract and harder to control until you get a grasp of it. So I
Well, what I find really enjoyable about working in 3D is you do get, like, to your point, you do get all of those different, you get qualities of painting, you get certain aspects of photography, you get
yeah,
certain aspects of sculpture.
yeah,
Um, and so it really, to me, and you can really dive into, you know, any one of those things much further.
mhm,
Like you can, okay, for this picture, I'm really gonna like concentrate on the lighting or whatever.
mhm,
And really kind of like make that more of a focus. Or I'm really gonna, you know, concentrate on, maybe I'm just gonna have it more of like a still studio lit kind of like vibe, but I'm gonna really make a badass 3D model that looks like fucking insane and really put all my time into this crazy sculpture, whatever.
mhm.
And so
Very nebulous.
yeah, there's just so much room to, you know, learn and expand. It doesn't feel like something I could remotely get like, oh, I've kind of feel like I've kind of conquered that or sort of like learned that whole thing. It's like, no, I will be like learning. And then I think, that's just from kind of like a more technical aspect, from a actual sort of like artistic aspect. Obviously, there's, endless possibilities that of sort of like ways that you could, use these tools to express things.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about the topic of fame. Um, to talk about what before the Christie's auction, before this massive worldwide fame had acquired, where people that might not be in the circle that you were building prior, because you were very popular. I think if we use metrics, for example, I think your Instagram, you had a lot of followers prior to this Christie's event. Obviously, more kind of built out from that. Um, but how do you deal with the fame? If you seem to handle and deal with the weight of the fame very well. How do you manage that on a daily basis? Do you think on it, or you know?
To be honest, it's pretty like in sort of real life, the like, oh, can I get a selfie or blah blah blah, like that stuff is very on or off. And it's very much, I control how much of that happens. Because again, I walk down the street in my neighborhood, whatever, nobody gives a fuck. Nobody's, oh my God.
Gooba gabba.
Nobody cares. And nobody knows who the fuck I am.
That's
like,
that's really beautiful though, right? To be famous and
I was actually, I went to dinner.
you want that? You want that everywhere?
Can't say who it was, but I went to lunch recently with somebody who's actually.
Just spell the first letters of the name.
What's up?
First 5 letters of the name. Okay, go ahead.
And that would give it away, actually. But it's one of those things where like this person was a legit like movie star, and then we were just going to like lunch or whatever, and it was like seeing people's reactions where it's like I couldn't even imagine, like literally just walking into a restaurant, everybody immediately just like, holy shit,
dude,
that's that person. What the like they're looking at me like, do you know who you're walking with? It's like oh my God, like look, they're right there.
Matthew McConaughey, I can't believe it.
Right there next to you, like
he's eating lunch with Bill Gates. This is crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely. I couldn't imagine having that level of like fame where it was just like anywhere you go, you feel like everybody. Oh, are they looking at what I'm eating? Are they looking at my fucking ketchup on my face? It's like it's kind of. That would be crazy. For me, it's like, again, yeah, I go to some fucking NFT conference and,
you
3,000 dorks know who I am. But again, I go across the street from that conference and I go into a fucking 7-Eleven and it's like, who the fuck are you? Go fuck yourself. Are you buying something or not? Nobody knows.
That's awesome, though. I think
so. It's it's super on or off. I think the thing that's a little harder to turn on or off, obviously, is kind of the online stuff and like the sort of like mind fuck of social media.
Yeah.
And it very much, in my opinion, is something that is a necessary evil, I guess, in some respects. That it is this thing that is very damaging in many respects and very detrimental to your mental health. And so it's about using that tool and finding ways to use it in a healthy way. And I think it's tough and it's something that you have to kind of continually be vigilant about because we're social people and, we're social beings and everybody wants people to like them.
Of course.
Like, I'm no different than this. I don't give a fuck if anybody likes me. I'm just fuck. Just shut the fuck up. Everybody wants people to fucking like them.
Yeah.
And so when you see people online just, oh, hey, fuck you. It's sort of like that really kind of, it fucks with your head. Yeah. And so that part of it, I think, is that's always a challenge,
got a lot of eyeballs on you. You got a lot.
Yeah, I don't think that's something you necessarily get over. I think it's more just something you just kind of slow. And I think, again, there was like a pretty big sort of like ramp up here with the NFT thing. But prior to the NFT thing, luckily I had done many interviews and podcasts and people shot little documentaries on me and like all kinds of this stuff to prepare me for that moment. So it wasn't like, I'd seen seen people kind of freak out meeting me and shit like that. So there was some prior sort of like experiences that I had that it wasn't just like all of a sudden, what the fuck, introducing Beeple.
Sure.
And so, well, I think that did prepare me, but
also in a different time of your life too. Like you're not in your 20s. Yeah, exactly.
100%. I'm 41. This is not. I couldn't imagine that this is some 20-year-old kid this is happening to. It's like,
oh, that'd be gnarly. Yeah,
that would be.
Yeah, your family and you guys are all very close as well. I think that's one thing I loved seeing.
Massive piece of it. If you're some 20-year-old kid who's got nobody, and you're just all of a sudden, because the thing that's, I think, the harder part of it than the fame, this or that, is more so suddenly you got all these people coming out of the woodwork and they want to be best friends.
Yeah. Like, how do you tell?
Friends, and 90% of them are full of shit. They just want fucking money somehow, or they want you to promote their thing or their fucking NFT thing or their blah blah blah. And so it's sort of like, if you again, because I had a career of, very successful career prior to all this, and I had.
You're almost retired too. I think I remember.
Well, I was sort of like I could have retired, but
this is before
I
all this. Yeah.
wanted to keep. I'm 40. There's no chance I'm gonna like fucking retire.
No,
so,
like not retire, but like retire from like a lot of intense client work. I'm saying like, but you always do art. You were always going to do every day is forever.
Yeah,
basically. Yeah.
Yeah, I could have done that, but I think maybe I'll go back to that in 1 second. But yeah, I think prior to this, I had enough work coming in that I was already turning down stuff, and I could already have some level of sort of like, that seems like that's going to be a good deal for you. I'm not sure that's going to be a good deal for me.
Yeah, you're very business savvy too, I think, which is also kind of rare for a lot.
Yeah, and so one thing I will say about client work, I think the grass is always greener to some respects versus client work versus collectors. I will say the one thing that I did really kind of enjoy, two things about client work that I enjoyed is one, client work. I think it was part of the reason I kept doing it was I really liked that it pushed you to push yourself. And that's something that I do to some degree, but not as much necessarily as with client work, because the client's like, hey, make it look like this. And you can't go back to them and be like, well, I don't really know how to do that. Or that's not really nice. It's like, no. I'm pretty sure I want you to make it fucking look like that. And like, they don't give a fuck. And they want you to fucking make it look like that because that's what they're fucking paying you to do. And so then you have to fucking figure out how to make it look like that. And so you have to push yourself to like grow and like, okay, well, fuck, I need to fucking figure out how to make it look like that. And so
you can do that to yourself though, You
can do that to yourself, but again,
it's not the same thing.
It's not the same as when a client's like,
so are you doing client work now, and what's your day rate?
Like
you doing client work now?
What's up?
So you doing client work, and what's your day rate now?
My day rate is $2.5 million.
Oh, whoa. Easy, bro. Easy. Wait, for that Madonna pillar?
No, it's one of those things where I think, that's something that I will say I do kind of like miss a bit with client work, is that kind of like push. And I think it's also just on some levels, it's much more cut and dry.
Yeah.
It's just like, especially if you are disciplined and experienced enough to set up projects in a way that they do not turn into clusterfucks.
Yeah, you have to do that. That's a whole thing. Yeah.
That's a whole thing. And once you kind of like learn how to do that, okay, I need a contract. Okay, this guy seems fucking sketchy. Okay, this is like fucking, it's going to be a total nightmare at the end of it because this guy seems like a dickhead. Like, once you learn all okay, I'm not going to give them, learning how to manage clients and when to ask for feedback and when not to ask for feedback and like, and how to present work, all of those things. Once you kind of learn how to manage clients, and it becomes very cut and dry. Here's the fucking thing I said I was going to do. Pay me the fucking money you said you were going to pay. And there's no bullshit. There's never like drama. And so it's very transactional in a way that I really enjoyed. And then for me, then the art could just be the art. So I'm very thankful. I couldn't imagine people who kind of come up through the, traditional system where they've constantly from sort of, they didn't have the luxury of developing their voice and practice as an artist without financial concern. And I think that to me is massively just something that I'm very thankful for. And I feel very lucky that I got 20 years of being able to do that, because
what's made you who you are.
Well, and it fucks with your head more than, it fucks with my head a little bit more than I thought it was going to, if I'm being honest. In that it's like, I'm still going to do what I want to do. If it's sort of like, well, because again, you have to sort of like think about these things in a different context. If now I'm going to draw, a big giant picture of Jeff Bezos with dicks all over his head. So it's like, well,
Wait, are you projecting onto what every day you're gonna do tonight?
no, I've already done that actually. But
No,
so
I mean,
like,
are you gonna evolve that though? You're gonna go further?
I don't think so. Not
Okay, yeah,
But so it's one of those things where again, you just if this is just a picture for the internet, well, that feels very at home on the internet. But if
yeah.
you're like, okay, now you got a picture like somebody's gonna buy this for a bunch of money, and then are they gonna want to put a bunch of dicks on the wall of their like living room? Probably not.
Are you talking about the separation between a collector and clients? Is that
Well, I'm talking about the separation between like making work for just yourself, which I was just doing before. I'm the fucking client, I'm the fucking collector, I'm the fucking whole thing.
Yeah.
I'm just making this, and it's like I'm not making work that for somebody to pay money for.
Yeah.
Versus if you start again, now I'm making work to pay money for, and now it's sort of like, and you don't think people are gonna like that much. I'm still gonna do it, but I just not, and I still did do it, but I just like in the back of your head, you can't. I'm not stupid. Like I know people like probably would rather not hang a picture of some disgusting penises, Jeff Bezos, whatever, on their thing. But
I wouldn't know. There's some freaky people out there that like
that's true.
Stuff, and they want to have that conversation piece too. So
true. But again, all things sort of like equalize. Most people probably they would rather have something a little bit more sort of like safe and tame. And so again, sort of looking at the like general population in general. And so I think being able to have a very clear separation between this is how I make money, this is my art. I do think there is a lot of value in that still.
Do you? So in all like in this duration, so you were famous. I would say you're famous before all this happened, and then you got uber famous, and post this uber famous, say the past 2 years, you have an audit. Like, what's one of the oddest things that's happened to you, or like a moment you're just like, I can't believe this is happening? I'm sure there's lots of them. I've heard a couple of them.
Yeah.
And you probably can't name names, but like some of the things and the people that you've experienced, I'm like, this is crazy. I can't believe you're doing this right now. Is there something that comes to mind? You're just like, I can't believe that happened. And that's like, because I would imagine when you get famous, like uber famous, it just comes down to like crazy memories and like crazy experiences. Like, I can't believe that just happened. And like this hung out with Madonna or did XYZ with Elon or whatever, like.
Yeah, there's definitely been quite a lot of those. I think to me, some of the like more like again, kind of like bringing it back to the like art thing versus kind of a celebrity stuff. Is some of the art things like for instance the like Human One thing when that was in the evening sale last year, and it again sold for a pretty good chunk of change. Like seeing it in relation to other things that were literally less expensive, that it's like, oh shit, like our thing is like fucking 3 times more than this Monet right here. Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, those were some of the things where it's like, what the fuck is like, this is crazy. And I think it's like seeing the extreme enthusiasm that this space and the extreme sort of awakening to this art form from the digital art side, the crypto people, and seeing how jacked up everybody got projected up for a second there. Everybody got projected up. Now, not so much. Not so much.
Yeah, we're we're in November now.
Yeah,
we're in a bit of winter right now. We're the buildings and the concept of it's kind of shook up a little bit, which is actually, when I look at it, I go, this is good. This is important. A correction in the right direction. Potentially, it's a bummer. It's sad for a lot of things, but at the same time, it's like there was a lot of weird hype, weird crap that was happening. It's like, this is not going to last. It can't last. It's not sustainable. And Allah, here we are.
Oh yeah, and I think that's something that has been, I mean, honestly, been very challenging for me as well, throughout this year, because that's been a new sort of like aspect to this whole thing, is having this outside market affect the value of what I do.
Yeah.
And that's not really been
It can't be
part.
healthy. It can't be healthy, right?
It's probably not healthy. And again, this is sort of, if you have a, it's almost like everybody has like publicly traded companies now in a way,
Yeah.
because everybody now has these, floor prices or these prices of XYZ that everybody knows.
Yeah.
And that's
It's
the
the
price
blockchain.
of your work or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's very public, and that's not how it was before. Like the industry that we, worked in or work in prior to this, the VFX and games and that, was notoriously, everybody was very secret about how much money, what's your day rate. Nobody could share those things.
Yeah.
Everybody, that was kept very private. Nobody had any idea how much money people made. And so now it's different in that, one, everything's totally public.
Yeah.
Two, we're operating, the NFT market right now is operating inside of another market, this crypto market. And when things happen in the crypto market that have nothing to do with even digital art, much less me,
Yeah.
that it affects the prices of what I do.
Yeah.
And so, just to
It's
kind of
so volatile.
place this in timing for people, when I don't know when they're gonna be watching this. This is, yesterday was the FTX collapse. And so uh it's seeing things like that, where it's like some dude who, made this crypto exchange, blah blah blah, and kind of seems like he lied to a bunch of people and overestimated, blah blah blah. Suddenly I come in and like everything, the value of what I make went down 10% because of this totally external forces.
Yeah.
Versus that's not the case in like the, how we worked before with like freelance. It wasn't like, oh, something happens in the world and like, okay, now your day rate went down 10%, like overnight.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like,
well, that's why the fine art world is kind of hands off, honestly. I think because they're like, oh yeah, let's see how these nerds settle out,
and I think that's, I think if I were them, I probably would do the same thing.
Yeah.
And I probably,
unless you're down to do that ride, because it's like riding it's volatile. I mean, we talked about this too. It's like how in the history of art, whenever has art been attached to currency the way it is, a nascent new currency, so a very new thing. So currency and new, and then our art is deeply and rooted and connected to technology. We can't do what we do without the programmers making the programs that they make.
Yeah,
we can make art.
It's global too. Like again, all these movements in the past are, this started here and spread, blah, blah, blah. This is like boom, instantly global.
It's crazy because it's the speed of the internet too. So like, never in history of humanity has art had this many things attached to it. And that's what I think makes it so interesting, because like you said, your MO is like, you're like making images that entertain, and they're kind of like made for the internet, of your observation of the internet and the world at large, but it's kind of like for the internet, which I think makes a lot of sense when you really look at what you're creating. You're kind of reacting to that world around you. But when you think about it, it's like our art is attached now to this new technology, this new blockchain technology, this new currency technology, and now like also like global things like Apple and Mac and Microsoft, NVIDIA, AMD, processors, game engines, all these things. It's crazy. Like it's and it also, like, if you think about it, does the artist head in, because you're thinking like, oh, one day you're up and the other day you're down. It's like, if we weren't already so like self-conscious, it's like, yeah, here comes destruction mode, and you got to really be like, just hold on. And because I knew this was going to happen, I was like, there's no way this can keep climbing. And then
no, and I knew it was going to happen too. And I'm the fucking one who was saying, shit's, I think we're gonna have a correction at some point here, guys.
it made
so
climb back.
Obviously, I knew this was going to happen, but it was sort of like, to be on the other side of it doesn't feel super great. And I think it is something that I think is was inevitable, and I think it's also going to be ultimately healthy from the space because there are a lot of people who are just like very much in this for a quick pump and dump just to make a buck, and this will weed all those people out.
Yeah, I feel like it's weeded a lot of them out, I would imagine, because like they can't survive these kind of hits, and it's like,
Well, and I think it's also going to weed out the people who are sort of like, do you want like there was a lot of people I saw who from our world who never made work before, like I or made very little personal work.
yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're making all this shit. And it's sort of like, no, you're really just, I mean, you're really just doing that because people are paying you. But now those prices have come back down to the level where it's like, well, you
Realistic.
probably still will make more money on the like client work now. Like it went from like, fuck you clients, I'm not fucking doing that. I'm an NFT artist, which I'm sure a lot of people burn those bridges on the way out with a fucking just flaming glory. And now obviously things have come back down to fucking reality, and that was inevitable because this is always going to be very fucking hard to make a living at because again, you just get up every day and make up some bullshit, and then people give you money. Yeah, I'll do that. Like, who wouldn't want to do that?
Well, that's what it seemed like. I think that was the illusion of it. It was like, oh my God, it's an oasis. I equate it almost to the gold rush, of American history. It's like, it's akin to that. It's like the abstract idea that there's something of wealth that's hidden into something else, and you have to find it. You have to work for it, but you could potentially be set up for life. But at what cost? You could, abandon your family and you go out into some land and you get attacked, and then you're just like, you have the plague, and then you're done. It's like there's all these things, and only a certain amount of people make it through this, and it literally is a war of attrition. And I think when it comes down to your MO, when it comes to art, when we talked about that, this is why I'd love to bring the conversation, because your art is, as you just mentioned, unhealthily attached to this whole volatile, nascent technology and currency, and that's got to be so noisy. And it's almost like you have to kind of centralize yourself down, because in all honesty, you could have taken what you had been given from that auction and be like, well, I'm out, like cash out and be like, I'm going to make my everydays, but you've doubled down on yourself. You have the space now, which is a massive investment in who you are and what you're doing, not only for you, but for your family and your legacy. This is a big thing, and like, which I think I love that. I think it's a really bold move. And it also, if anybody has any question of your integrity, it's like, well, here you go. There's a physical thing that's like, you're here to stay, you're here to make art, you're here to support the community, you're here to express yourself and be a part of that. Really excited for that project.
100%. I think it's definitely, it's funny because like after the sale, so many people are like, did you retire now? It's like, you're out of your fucking mind. I'm retired. It's like,
you're working harder now, huh?
Are you talking about? Yeah, it's definitely way more fucking work. And I think it's one of these things where like, again, I could have retired before this, but it's like making this stuff and putting out this work, like that's all I've ever been interested in. Like, I'm not super well rounded. You got jujitsu and sort of trucks and other dude shit, man shit. You got
got some dude shit. Yeah, I'm definitely some dude.
You got a bunch of like man shit that you're interested in. I don't have any man shit that I'm interested in.
Yeah, you need to get some more man shit, dude. I know. I was watching you on Joe Rogan. I was like, oh man, what are you doing? You're totally failing it as a dude. Yeah, and Joe was like, God, what is going on here? Like, what am I talking to? I think he said that your wife pegs you. That was, I rolled out of my seat laughing. That was great.
That was hilarious too. It's very funny because it's like he's very much like a lot of my friends back home who are very, into.
As a dude.
They're demands men, and then you got me, and it's like, I order a fucking salad or something at a restaurant, and I'm freaking,
you big puss.
I get called a bunch, and they use your wife tag you for that salad. Yeah,
yeah. Real. Again, you're just yourself, and you're not apologetic for it. You're just like, that's what you do. But yeah, you're really, your MO is literally like making your work and being about it and doing that. Tell me what would be like a perfect day for you, like the most ideal day. Can you give me that kind of, and did these perfect days happen in your life? Like kind of like a good rhythm of them? What does that look like?
I would say it looks like getting a lot of sort of like work done and feeling like it was a very kind of like productive day.
Mm.
Working on, we've got a good variety of things going kind of at the space here. So I think it's about sort of working on that stuff. Yeah, and spending time with the family. I think that's really it.
That's good.
Do those days happen?
One
Kind of.
Monday through Sunday. How many days of the week are you encountering like efficient, effective works occurring and family time balanced into that?
There's definitely family time balanced, I would say, pretty good. Not as much as I would like, but not terrible.
Yeah.
Just because I don't have any friends too, so it's like I fucking work and then I just go home and like spend time.
Well, you work with your friends though, and your brother, right?
I mean, yeah, I work with some friends, but like I don't have social time with friends outside of that. Besides going to conferences, going to talks, blah blah blah.
And that's like once a month kind of thing.
Yeah, once a month. Yeah, I would say something like that. But I think those days kind of happen in a way, but there's always, like you were saying, more roadblocks than I would like. So the days usually aren't as satisfying as like, oh wow, I got all the shit I wanted to do done today. It's more like, well, you started something and then this came up and then I had to fucking put out this fire and then blah blah blah. And it's sort of like, and I'm also just I'm very impatient. And that's been another thing that's been tough with another challenge. Yeah, with moving into like physical stuff, because it's sort of like, okay, well, we're gonna make this thing. It's like, okay, well, that piece is back ordered for 3 weeks. Okay.
Fuck. Yeah, and keeping that energy alive. Yeah.
Go ahead and come back to this in 3 weeks.
You have to energy pivot a lot then, huh? You have to go like, okay, well, fuck, I can't fix this. No money can fix this. I got to shift my energy. Yeah. Do you do lists at all? Do you do like, because I'm big on lists. We talked about this. Do you do lists at all? Like, I need to execute blah, blah, blah. Because I do that.
No, I should have. I used to do that. I used to be very good about like, okay, my to list today, I need to like get back to that.
Oh, dude, that's the savior, man. Yeah.
I feel like NFTs have fucked up a lot of my sort of routines that I was in.
Sure.
And I think that is definitely something I should sort of like come back to, because right now it very much, there's so much different projects going on, and they're all like before I felt like I had a lot of different projects going on, but I see now that those projects were all actually very similar. Like before it'd be like, oh, I'm going to work on my short film today, and then maybe I'll do like a little bit of like a VJ clip, and then I got some client work, and then I'm going to do my everyday. And it's like, well, those are all kind of just different shades of like digital art. Because now it's like, okay, I've got to do all that digital art shit still.
Yeah.
But then also I need to figure out like, what does the lighting look like in this room? What should we do here? How should we approach, this museum thing? How are we going to talk to this? Like,
yeah,
there's a lot of
too, huh?
There's a lot more like context switching, and the contexts are not, they're like wildly different. That it's like, okay, I'm working on this digital art thing, then I need to go look at this painting and give notes on that, or like blah blah blah. Like, it's just very different sort of like context.
Who's managing your time beyond yourself?
Nobody.
You need lists, bro. You need lists again. Get on that.
I do need the list, because
for
like
a purpose-driven person like yourself, who your value is based on what you've accomplished. I mean, that is literally the lights at night. It's like
100%.
because you can have a flashlight and it only sees 30 feet in front, but you can go as long as your legs will take you. So and the list and having lists and structure has changed my life, like for the better. But it also becomes I become a slave to the list sometimes, and I have to get rid of the list sometimes because I'm like, today can just be a day where you can exist. Yeah, which is difficult. But I get that from travel, and I'm sure you do as well. Like a break in the structure, and then you come back to the right routine. Because I love routines. I don't know if you like routines, but I love it.
I definitely operate much better when it's a routine, and I think that's been tough over the last sort of like 2 years here too. It's just like the routine's been
You travel
like
a lot and stuff.
a ton of travel, a ton of like just new sort of new. I mean, to be honest, even like on a more base level, like I'm just not that used to sort of like collaborating with large groups of people.
Mm.
Like the work that I would do, the digital work that I would do, I almost never had people that I would collaborate with. There's a few sort of like instances here and there over the last kind of like, 20 years, but the vast majority of it is me sitting in a fucking computer doing whatever I want.
By yourself.
I finish by myself. I finish the whole thing. Then I show people. And so that's been something that's different too. Just sort of getting into like a routine of like, okay, we're gonna have meetings and we're gonna and like, that's been a challenge as well.
This space that we encounter, I'd call it our ecosystem, this digital art space, and now this like nascent currency space that cryptocurrency has been around for a long time, but it's now like becoming somewhat of a a thing of a discussion. What would you change? What was like a thing that you like? If I could make that change, what would that be? Better the space or to whatever? Like, is there something that you thought like this would make the space so much better? Like curation as a topic, like that kind of thing, So,
I think what would make the like more broadly the NFT space better, I would say is the biggest thing I think would be safety. I think it's still like the safety around this stuff is just very bad.
Could you define safety, the concept of safety? I think I know what you mean, but just for general.
Safety is more so like, when you go into a gallery and you're like, hey, I want to buy this piece of art. You're not worried that somebody's back at your house robbing it. Or you're not worried when you hand them your credit card, they're going to be like, thanks, peace.
Yeah.
And just like fucking take off with your credit card.
Zoink.
And they But with digital art, you do kind of have to worry about that stuff because it is much easier to get tricked and lose your money. And so I think until it becomes much safer and easier, I think it's not going to be fully sort of like mainstream. I personally am shocked.
Really, honestly, because why would you want something that isn't secure and safe to become mainstream? The thing that you want to become mainstream is something that's inspiring, something great that gives life, but it also is a safe thing for people to actually invest in and be a part of. So, yeah, that makes sense.
And I think ease of use too. Like, I think people don't understand that it's sort of like this shit is still so complicated. Like, it's like buying a fucking
so complicated.
NFT is still like, if you want to buy an NFT with Ethereum, you are talking about a multi-day process that is like
it's horrible. Yeah,
it's a lot of
work. Thankfully, my wife, she helps with basically minting the art for me, and that is the thing she tells me she has to deal with. I'm like, oh, that sounds horrible. Like, just like the minting process of actually doing that, then the sale process, and like it's just really exhausting. And that's again, hats off to artists that have really adopted it, understood it enough to be able to use it as a mechanism of profit. That's pretty impressive, all things considered. So. But yeah, so I agree. Safety is number one, and that's totally a great point. And then also just like ease of use, because right now it's almost like it's like the oldest, most primitive form of the internet, almost That's what it feels like. It's just like, this is so primitive. And I think the person that's going to crack those two things and solve that is going to really hopefully make a lot of money for themselves, but at the same time solve a lot of our own problems for the public at large, which there's probably people that are out there trying to figure it out, which is hopefully.
Oh yeah, there's tons of people, 100%. There's definitely shitloads of people who are working on this stuff.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on the metaverse? You get into the metaverse much?
I think the metaverse is an interesting term because I think it's become somewhat meaningless. Just because it's been thrown around in this like fucking marketing term that's like Pepsi's entering the metaverse. Fucking
Dogecoin.
Yeah, it's just kind of like what the fuck does that even mean? Like it, and I think
what's a metaverse to you? Like maybe we should define it first for you.
To me, the metaverse is literally none of the things people are talking about right now. It does not exist. It probably will not exist for, I would say, 5 years.
Yeah, maybe
minimum.
8, probably 8. Yeah.
To me,
the technology needs to be there. Yeah.
To me, the metaverse is, I think what we will come back to know as the first true metaverse is AR glasses and wearing AR glasses. And it won't happen until, in my opinion, Apple makes a headset and everybody puts these on. And it won't happen until the experience with the headset is better than the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And it will get better at the phone. And when it gets better at the phone, your mom's going to have the headset.
Mm-hmm.
Your fucking grandpa's going to have the headset. Everybody who has the phone now will have the headset because it will be legitimately better. Like, oh, wow. Instead of staring at this tiny little fucking 4-inch screen, I can see giant screens everywhere. And I can fucking
screen. I am the screen. Yeah.
I can fucking just sit in my living room and it's completely fucking empty and it looks like I've got 5 fucking 80-inch TVs. And like, you know, and I don't even need a fucking TV at all.
No.
And like,
yeah,
it's one of these things where
new terms will arise because TV. I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, films. That's not really what it is anymore because nothing's shot on film really. TV shows. That's not really a thing, or it's like there's new forms for it. It's like observable content or consumable content. But I think that metaverse will have that too. So, in your opinion, a metaverse, as we know it, as a basic definition, which I agree is kind of misused and misunderstood. It's an ecosystem of where people exist in a digital form, right?
It's an ecosystem. It is more so like when we switch from a predominantly interacting in these 2D environments, web browsers, 2D.
Yeah.
Social media, screens. TikTok, Instagram, blah, 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 2D. It's all 2D. You're looking at text. You're looking at menus that are all 2D on a screen. Mm-hmm. I think as soon as we switch over to, I think first AR and then VR, but I think the VR will be definitely after this. When we switch over to interacting more in 3D spaces, that's when I think we will be in the metaverse. But those 3D spaces have to be, in my opinion, much more rich and engaging. And in most games and 3D environments, they're far less engaging than real life.
Oh, yeah.
And they will not be adopted widely until they are more enjoyable to spend time in than real life.
Yeah.
And I believe definitely AR will come first, and that you will have a bunch of 3D objects. Like I'm sitting at my desk right now, and I could have a bunch of tiny little 3D objects on it, all my little Tamagotchis and my blah, 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 whatever.
Tamagotchis?
Tamagotchis.
Tamagotchis.
You know what? I think
those are little pets, digital pets.
Pronunciation of that, we'll have to Google that afterwards. Who can even know the correct pronunciation?
Well, we both studied Japanese.
Tamagotchi, some say Tamagotchi.
Tamagotchi, yeah. But Gucci, okay, yeah. No, but you're right, and I do totally agree. I think the next bridge is because what we experience and use in the physical space, it should not be diminished or detoured because it is where where we live, right? But the digital space with AR is like a heightened version of that, which potentially, if it's wearable, usable, interactable, and actually has like like because that was like the thing with the iPhone. It was like I think Steve and the team were like, we're gonna make the thing that you never knew that you always wanted or you always needed. And I think
That's what this would be.
it will have to be that or won't be relevant. And
No, it will be that. Yes.
well, it has to be, right? Because like, because if you think about it, like Zuckerberg and his team, they're working on kind of bringing the metaverse to the social spectrum of it, which I think is interesting as well. And I think that I would like to see that. I would like to experience it. I'm curious of it, but I've experienced almost all levels of these things, and I'm not an early adopter because I go like, all right, this is cool. Now I have a headache. This is big and clunky. I'd rather just be in the world. But I love my reality though. I've designed that reality to be something I love. I love the people around me. I love to see them. I love to do the things that I do in the real world. But that's not everybody. I'm fully aware of that. But yeah.
No, and I think the other distinction that I make that a lot of people don't make, to me, is the sort of metaverse part of it, and that a lot of people right now are creating universes, but those are just like walled gardens that are no different than
like
a lot of times it's
Minecraft
just
or something.
Well, it's just a game with NFTs. Like if you're sort of like, to me, if your definition of a metaverse is a game with NFTs, then I disagree. There's nothing against that. It's not saying that's bad, but to me, I don't think that is a metaverse because it's not something where my parents are. And like, unless my parents are part of this and like everybody's part of it, everybody's kind of like, again, not everybody, but almost everybody's part of the internet. And so that's like, to me, the first kind of, it is a type of a metaverse in a way, in that sense. It's this area we all sort of like interact in. But to me, the actual sort of like, what I think we'll think of as the first metaverse is when we're interacting with 3D objects in a 3D space, which I believe AR. And now all these things, like the idea of owning sort of like, kind of digital objects, then I think will make a lot more sense.
Totally. Well, because it's almost like owning furniture.
Then that little thing on your desk, it's not just like, hey, let me show you this thing. It's like somebody just walks into the room and it's like, oh, what the fuck is that? Oh, you've got one of those? Oh, there's only like fucking 50 of those. Like, that's fucking badass. You've got one of those.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to like, I think the value of some of these virtual things will be much more immediately recognizable because it won't be this like, oh, okay, I'm a bored ape. It's like, okay, well, how can I see you're a bored ape? What tells me? Well, you got to look at my Twitter profile, and then you've got to look and see if my profile picture is a hexagon or a circle.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
And it's sort of like, that's the best we have now, though.
Yeah.
So
it's like very, very primitive, honestly.
It's very, very primitive to what it could be.
And what it will be. It's going to be.
What it will be is you're a bored ape. You literally look like a fucking, like, you've got some crazy ape fucking thing, or you've got like, this little fucking thing on your shoulder, or you like have some badass fucking suit that you're wearing that makes it's like, oh, okay, Jesus Christ. Like, you don't have to like, you could have this sort of like social signaling.
Easy, bro. Easy.
It's much more visceral than like, here, if you've got 5 minutes, I can explain to you why I'm cool. Like
10 minutes.
Maybe 10 minutes. It's going to take a sec.
This gets me so excited though about this space because we work and build in 3D. So imagine like in the future where our tools are dimensional into the 3D space via AR, which is awesome. I'd love to get away from screens. I'd love to lay in my bed and make stuff and then walk around, go to my gym and do stuff. That's really cool. So being able to do it in real time, active. And then the real cool thing, one of the coolest things is I ultimately want to build experiences for people to go through, almost like you go through my movie set through my movie. You
Yeah.
know, that to me is what gets me the most pumped up, because that's really how much further can you go? That's a video game basically, but instead of being, you know, a controller and screen interface, which is, let's be honest, is very primitive, I'm going into the space via like a full immersive experience. I think that's ultimately sharing memories, sharing experiences, sharing those kind of things. That's when the art's going to get really crazy. We're going to open up another thing. There's a topic that we've talked about that I would love to talk with you further about, is artificial intelligent art. What are your thoughts on it?
I think it's very interesting what's happening right now, and I think it's progressing very quickly. Um, and just like every few days, there's another sort of like, you know, they updated this or they added this new capability. So I think it's something that's really moving very fast. Um, and I think it is going to be disruptive in the industry, um, in a number of ways, though I'm not exactly sure how those are going to play out. Because again, I think this is something where this is not new. Technology comes out and it renders jobs obsolete, um, and it makes new jobs too.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, when I grew up, I didn't think to myself, "Oh, I want to be a web designer. I'm going to be a web designer when I grow up."
Mm-hmm.
That's not what I was saying in 1988 when I was, because that job didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
That job did not exist. And by the time I went through college and graduated from college, that job did exist.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very, normal job that people had. And so the idea that this is just going to like blanketly eliminate jobs without like creating new jobs in the process, I don't buy that. But I do think it is very powerful, and people will need to sort of like learn how to harness that power in their own skill set. And I think it kind of, for a number of positions, it moved the bar up in terms of like, okay, to make it, you need to be this good. It's like, well, now you need to be this good.
Mm-hmm.
But guess what? The tool can help you get there. And so it's like, I think um, it's something that, to me, especially on the computer science sort of like side of it, is just like I find completely fascinating. But yeah, I think it's
very
a
fascinating,
powerful new tool with a lot of new possibilities that we've just barely started to kind of like scratch the surface on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I think if you're able to apply it and use it in a creative way, or because right now it's the shiniest star, so everybody's looking at it like, oh my god, look at this thing. And I think it's key to just be aware of the fact that you're a free thinking human being, and use that as your tactile skill, and remember that. But because we talked about this a lot too when this all first started coming out. It's like, well, generating a pretty picture isn't really the goal anymore. It used to be like, hey, everybody, look at me. Publicly, I've acquired this many skills to make a pretty picture. And now it's like, well, the computer can almost do the same thing now by recreating the library of content in which you fed it. So what is your pursuit now? When the pretty picture pursuit is no longer the destination, then what are you doing? And I think that frees people up. And honestly, it frees people. Like, it's really shocking, because I think a lot of people are on different parts of that destination of, I really want to make pretty pictures, so therefore I'm going to acquire 10 years of skill to do so. But you get lost along that path of going, oh, now I'm like a YouTuber that does tutorials, and you're not really an artist in a sense, because you've become slave to the path. You're not thinking of where's your destination of a free thinking person. I think this is hopefully going to crack a lot of people's brains open and go like, oh crap, well, if I can generate a pretty picture, then what can I make? And I've noticed this too. I've done it socially with friends. I've showed them this thing, and then they started using it, and it's a real fast, interesting way to see what's in their subconscious. And you can see difference in taste instantly. Like I've had friends make stuff and I'm like, that's tasteless. That's literally just bad. And like even with the God tool, you still can't make something that I consider to have value. Not to be a jerk or an elitist, but it's like I've seen it. But then I see people that are really creative and have like a lot of taste and they make the craziest stuff. And I'm like, oh, so you've used this amazing prompt and you've added these things and then you've made something quite rich and unique because you know how to communicate to the machine. So fascinating. I'm really excited about it. I think it's wonderful. I'm also somewhat scared of it, but at the same time, I think that's what you need to have with a good tool. You need to be somewhat afraid of it, because it's you have to respect its power because it's powerful.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think if you are deriving most of the value of your work from purely being able to render a picture,
Mhm.
well, that's
That ship
gonna
sailed.
that's gonna be very tough. But I think again, this was looking back more historically, this was very similar to when the camera came out. It's like, well, we don't need painters anymore. Well, this technology is just gonna like destroy painting because now it's like, well, why would you take the time to paint something? And it's
Yeah.
like, well, we see now that didn't happen,
Mm.
and painting became more abstract and more sort of like figurative and more, uh, about the emotion of the image versus just like I'm going to make the image exactly how it is. And that's been the first, you know, X amount of years, which we're now at,
Yeah.
of sort of like digital art, where it's like, okay, let's perfectly try and recreate the existing world.
Mhm.
Let's make it. How can we make this dirt look exactly like dirt does outside? How can we make this beach ball look exactly? How can we make human skin look
Yeah.
exactly like human skin does in real life?
Yeah.
And now we've more or less cracked that to the point where it's like,
Yeah.
you know,
The biggest hole was the uncanny valley, and I think that it's getting very close to being solved.
I think it's
With
getting very
deepfake.
close.
Deepfake has basically been the solve, which is a perfect example to what you're saying. Is in my opinion, I think that deepfake is actually going to be the uncanny valley solver. When we say uncanny valley, if you're not familiar with it, it's basically when somebody makes a computer generated face or humanoid, the face has this weird thing where you know it's wrong because you don't have to be a professional artist or a CGI person to know what is right and what's wrong with faces because since we're born, we are studying the human face. So that's the biggest. That was like, in my opinion, was
Perfection.
yeah, and all the imperfections, like subtle eye twitches and all these little things that tell you like this is false. But the deep fake is massively popular, special, I think, because I think it's like what you said, it's AR basically. You take something that already exists and then you deep fake it over, which is like kind of using the computer again to generate this falsified version of something that's on top of another thing of reality. So I think that's really where the highest level is. Because if you watched like Blade Runner, the latest Blade Runner, have you seen that movie?
Yeah.
So Rachel in there, she's CGI, and they used an actress stand-in, obviously, but the CGI, that was like the first time I saw it, and I was like, this is so tastefully done, and almost it could have fooled me almost all the way, but there was a couple things I noticed just because I'm really looking for it, but nothing against the team because that was an incredible effort that they did. But then you look at like Rogue One, Star Wars, when the general, and he looks just CGI, even though it's ILM, they're the best in the world.
Yeah.
But then there's the deep fake on the latest Star Wars, I think, and I was like, wow, this is like really good. And then you see people like, deep faking Joe Rogan online, and it's like just like out of control. So it's
Oh,
really quite awesome.
honestly, the thing I saw that very recently, it was just like, oh my fucking Christ, is that Facebook actually is making these avatars
Mm.
where it's basically it's kind of like a mix of like video photogrammetry,
Mm.
that is a 3D render of your face, but it's being generated like they've got some way of making. I don't even know what the fuck they're doing. It didn't. I think it was actually something with this, which I don't know what this is. This.
Is this
Um,
public? That's what?
yeah. This public. This like it's. I don't even remember what they're called for. Like neuron radiance fields or something. This is going to be one of those. What is internet? Clipped in like fucking years or whatever. But there's a different way. I'm not even sure it's like polygons, how they're like capturing this, but it's basically just like
Oh, the radiance field. The radiance field. It's like creating
it's
Z depth
yeah,
and stuff.
it's some radiance field something, but it's like There is no fucking way you could tell that is.
That's going to be so scary because think about the political corruption that can happen from that, from people like deep faking false news, and like people really have to be cautious, and like authenticity is going to be the biggest thing, I think.
Neural radiance.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Dynamic neural, maybe it's
neural radiance fields, right?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. These neural radiance fields, which I don't even know what the fuck that means.
Yeah, NERF. NERF. I've seen that acronym before.
But that to me is like, when I saw the video of that, again, this is maybe like a week ago. No fucking way you would ever know that was not. No way. It looked perfect because again, it's like the deep fake, and that you're not animating every single eye twitch. It's using photogrammetry, and so it's like, it's got all those tiny nuances sort of like built in, but it is a 3D render. Like you could, change the lighting on the person or do anything or whatever. But
what is going on, guys?
It is fucking insane.
Yeah, that's right. I've seen.
So it's like, so anyway, so like kind of to get back to what we were saying, we've kind of conquered the like realism
on the screen. On the screen, yeah.
On the screen,
yeah.
And so
the 2D is not. It's basically been. It's almost like it's been charted, and it's been conquered. I would say, like it's almost to the point where it's been conquered. Like what I mean by this is taking the reality using 2 dimensions. We've acquired ultimate realism, almost in a sense, so like very close to it because of this technology. It's crazy. Yeah, it's like I said, one of the things I'm most afraid of is like, I mean, I'm always skeptical of everything I encounter on the internet. That's just how I am. I think that's saved me a lot of times. That's why I don't get into these things. I know that you're much more into these spaces and stuff, but that's going to be the thing that's going to really throw a lot of people off, because when you can just really just make a Trump digital and you get enough people to see it and make enough of a thing, or whatever your opinion is, it's going to be very scary, very, very scary. It's going to be a psychological conundrum for a lot of people, I'd imagine. But
I was actually surprised there was not more in the last election, but yeah.
Yeah, same. But I think that maybe there was, and maybe some of it probably got sanctioned or potentially cut out. I don't know. I'm just assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah. These are things that are way far beyond me. That's what you get with the population of really blessed people that have time on their hands. You get these abundance of bullshit. That's basically what's happening. Is there an artist right now that you really like, you admire, or an artist that you've been introduced to recently that you really like or are influenced by?
Not really, and it's not because it's like it's not so much that it's not any. It's more so that it's like there's like 5 artists that I'm like interested in, and like
there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I think it's just more so there's not like one. Like it's very hard for me to be like, this is the thing I'm interested in, because it's like I'm interested in like a lot of different things from like different artists, and like some of it might be, oh, I'm really interested in it. Like there's a lot of different aspects of it to it too now, whereas before it was sort of like when I was influenced by an artist, it was mainly just the aesthetic of what they did.
Sure.
Versus now there's a lot more sort of like layers to it, where it's like, oh, I might be interested in, this aspect of this person's life, if it's some like historical figure, or I might be interested if it's something in, contemporary artist, maybe I'm interested in sort of how they made editions of things, or how they did, XYZ, or how they're making this, how this sort of like mechanic in their artworks. And so there's a lot of like kind of like tiny little things that I'm interested in. But I would say in general, I'm interested more in, there's a lot of artists where it's like I'll like 1 or 2 things that they did, but like otherwise most of the stuff I will not like. Um, and so I think I'm more interested to like ideas
Mhm.
than like people per se.
That's a
And
really healthy outlook, I would say, because then you get into like mimicry. If you look at it too close and be like, I want to be like that, or your art basically just apes them without you knowing it really too, right? Because if you're looking at ideas, well, ideas are abstract, and your idea of something, if I said, think of a whale right now, you're thinking of a different whale than I am, but it's
yeah,
an idea of a whale. So I think that's holistically, I think it's a very honest and a very, very healthy approach, I think, to acknowledging other artists too. I feel the same. I feel like I love a lot of artists. I love all, and it all comes like I'm just thinking like Chris Cunningham, for example. I know he's an artist that we both admire and adore, but it's almost like that's his style and his aesthetic of pacing and cutting and editing. That visceral quality is what drew me to his work, particularly. Um,
yeah,
but then you go beyond that. You go, okay, well, why is this person doing it? And then more importantly, why am I doing what I'm doing? Which goes back to the AI thing. It's like if you can do if all the tools are out of your way, well then what is inside your head? And how authentic and original are you? And that's really the trick, That's in my opinion.
yeah, 100%. I think it's one of those things where um, I don't know. I think as the tools advance and as people have more ways to get these ideas out, there will be more people who are, you know, I don't. I think there will be a lot more people who consider themselves artists,
Hmm.
uh, which I think is fine. I think that's good. I think it's, um, but I think as the sort of like amount goes up, uh, I think it becomes very noisy, and it's harder to find those, true sort of like gems.
Hmm.
But that's where I'm also sort of like I get attracted much more to like the best ideas versus like okay, there's certain artworks or again like artists where like I might love and be like, this is absolute fucking brilliant masterpiece of this one thing they did, but everything else they did, it's like, yeah, no, pass. I think that's total bullshit.
Sure. Yeah, which is
So
wonderful. Yeah.
it's very hard for me to like just
I
be
think it'd be
like,
unrealistic for you to be like, I love everything that this person made.
yeah, and
And
I
it's
think
unrealistic for
that
an artist to make something that everybody would like too.
yeah, I think there are some people like that where I like a lot more of their stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but I think the other thing is my sort of like taste and my kind of like the aesthetic that I'm interested in changes every few years too.
Yeah.
And
You see it in
so
your everydays too. Yeah.
yeah, and so it's sort of like it's that kind of, helps sort of cycle through a lot of like kind of like people as well.
Yeah. Is there somebody in the contemporary space, or you don't have to name names, but I mean, because you have come from this space and now you're kind of been jettisoned into this fine art space and being ironically, I'm sure you admire the past, but you've not been like educated in a sense where, the nuances of these different, this is why this is what it is, and this is cultural significance here, and so on and so forth. Is there an artist that comes to mind? You're like, of a contemporary time, or even the art history? Do you even like do you enjoy art history? Because there's parts of art history I love because it's like that's crazy that person fucking did that. That's so cool, and you know,
Yeah, I think honestly, like earliest 20th century
mm,
art is what I'm sort of like most interested in because it seems like there was a lot of changes happening very quickly and a lot of movements being born.
yeah, a
Um,
century ago, things go in centuries.
yeah, that it was sort of like, sort of cubism and sort of modernism and sort of our ideas around abstraction and all of these things were sort of like forming in surrealism. And I think um, there was just a lot of new ways of looking at the world
Hmm.
rapidly sort of like happening. And I think we are very much in that time right now.
Mm.
That I think because of technological innovation, we are in a time of like rapid growth.
Rapid,
Uh,
rapid.
Um,
If there's a word that's faster than rapid, that's probably the word. Yeah.
double rapid. Uh,
Double rapid. Rapid
and I
squared.
think, and to me, I've always been very interested about how movements start
Hmm.
and how one person has an idea and it like affects a bunch of other art and it affects maybe
Culture.
all art moving forward. And to me, those are the artists and the sort of like concepts that I find very interesting because that's kind of at the core of what I'm trying to do is predict what art will look like in 100 years. What
Mm.
will art look like in 100 years?
Mm.
That's what I want to make. That's what I want to be striving towards. Uh,
Mm. Ambitious.
I think it's again nobody knows for sure. I obviously don't know, can't know, and so I can only guess.
Man.
Um,
Mm.
and so it's sort of like to me, that's what's been very interesting about looking at art history through the lens of like trying to predict the future.
Mm.
But I'm trying to like see like, okay, how could they have seen how this would play out 100 years ago?
Mm.
And like what were the things that they were thinking about and what are ideas that are so strong that 100 years later you're like, yeah, that was a good idea.
Mm.
Because a lot of ideas seem very good, but they don't stand the test of time. It's
No.
sort of, well, that was a pretty good idea, but then like literally like 12 years later we realized, wait, we don't really need to do that anymore, and we stopped doing it. And then
Mm.
like that idea and like or it doesn't make sense in the future anymore. That idea wasn't it made sense in that specific time and that specific climate or that specific XYZ.
Yeah.
But in the future, in 30 years, that idea is not relevant anymore. It's not new. It's not novel. It didn't change anything. It was just, it was that moment.
Mm.
And so to me, I'm very much trying to find out what are those ideas that will stand up for 100 years.
Mm. Yeah. I think yeah, I think you can figure out a general target for that based on what's relevant to the human experience,
Yes.
you know?
I think it does need to be more core
Yeah. Which is
to the
like we want to
experience.
be loved, we want to be heard, we want to be understood, we want to give love, we want to be able to experience life in an authentic formation. Whether people know that or not, most people don't even realize that. I think a lot of people are living an unauthentic life and they don't realize it, but I think that's ultimately when you reach enlightenment. I've not experienced it, but I've seen glimpses of it in my own life. It comes down to being authentically connected to who you are and those around you. And that is really where I think the core of value will last a century. And what you can do with art in order to give that to others, I think that's potentially,
Right?
yeah, that's potentially the structure, you know. That's my thought, you know. Um, anything that's lasted a test of time for me has been that, which is like it has that kind of formula inside of itself, you know. But yeah, it's fascinating things. To wrap this kind of up, is what's one of the things that you're most fortunate for? Like when you think about the concept of being fortunate, what I mean, you probably have a lot of blessings in your life. Is there something that stands out? Like I'm really fortunate for X or Y or whatever.
Um, so many things to list. I don't even know where to start. I mean, obviously,
Machine gun it out, Uzi style.
I mean, my family, I think that's massive. They've just been, my parents have always been insanely supportive.
They're such
Uh,
sweeties too. It was so fun to meet them and hang out with them. So sweeties.
yeah, yeah, it's definitely they've been, a part of this and sort of having them, be able to see all the fucking craziness of the last year, I think has been really cool, and be a part of it and meet some of these people, um, has been awesome. I mean, just the ability that the fact that I have the ability to do this is very, I'm very thankful for, especially, when you look at what's going on in the world right now. That, I mean, the fact that we're sitting here jerking each other off about fucking JPEGs, kind of like, give me a break here, guys. Like, that's not a fucking given everywhere in the world right now. That
No, yes, we're very blessed.
you're not starting with that base level of like appreciation for your fucking life. Like,
Yeah.
so I think it's like, I mean, I just, between those two things, there's a lifetime of fucking gratitude that I should be living with.
Mm. You have it though, right? You live with it.
I do, but again, it's one of those things like everybody else. It's like, I have to constantly be reminded of it, because when I encounter some minor little inconvenience, it's like, oh, the fuck.
Yeah.
This is so fucking stupid. This is fucking shit.
Well, that's the balance, right? Of wanting to be great and do great things, you must be emotionally connected to what you're doing. And that is the byproduct of it. But again, we can all be humbled by the fact that when your life is great, it's important to sit back and enjoy it. Yeah. That's tough to do though. I think we all fall victim to that, especially in this privileged world that we live in, which is, for the most part, a lot of people's lives, there's probably, we live in such an important, special age for humanity. I feel like there's just blessings galore, really. And things can always be better, of course, but there's a lot of things to be fortunate and thankful for, I think. Same. Is there somebody that you would like to give some praise or a shout out to, that somebody that's been, significant to you in your life outside of, say, maybe family, but somebody you want to be like, that person's rad, and big shouts to them, or an artist that's coming up, or I don't know, whatever. Anything come to mind? Nobody. Now this is over. Jimmy Kimmel.
There's honestly been so many people. It's so hard to like just name one or three people or whatever.
And then then they get mad because they didn't get heard. So okay.
Well, it's one of those things where there's like so many people have been so, like, I just feel so thankful to be part of this like community, and to be part of this, because I feel like there was a bit of a mashup of communities here. There was the whole crypto community that existed, and then there was the whole traditional art space that existed, and then there was the digital art space, and those were like three communities that had fucking nothing to do with each other.
Yeah.
And now it's this weird fucking soup of these three fucking communities all together. So to me, in terms of like just giving a shout out to people, like, I feel very fortunate to have come up through the digital art community, and it feels like the one place like that I feel like I very much kind of belong, and sort of like, and this feels like my sort of like tribe of people. And so I the amount of support that I've gotten from that community has obviously just been insane, and something that I will be forever sort of like grateful for, and something that has put me in this position. And so
you give a lot though too. I think it's a symbiotic relationship, I'd say. Going down to like, we talked about your everydays, you just releasing those files to people that are new, and there's so many new digital artists that came up in the space, and they like learned from seeing your work and your files, and kind of became themselves. And of course, in the beginning, they ape your style and they do all these things and they call it their own. That's part of the first layer of learning. You're going to copy everything because you don't know any better, but then you become yourself, and then you like you said, and I think when you're at the level where you've been doing it for so long, it just becomes a second nature. You don't look at art necessarily as, I want to ape this. You look at it as, what's the idea behind it? And then you step into that space, because ultimately, like I said, and I think the AI thing is going to be great, because it's going to break the barrier potentially from having to use all these like complicated tools to get to the thing. and it's going to come down to ideas. Who's got the idea? Who's that brilliant idea? What's that century idea? And this is something we talked about too, is like, where's that century idea? And that's going to come down to like knowing who you are intrinsically and understanding your fellow human being intrinsically and understanding that situation. That's just my hypothesis of solving that kind of a question, because yeah, it's really so massive. So last question. This is another thing I'm trying to do to the podcast to kind of evolve it a little bit more. And I don't know, I can't promise that this is going to happen because people are very elusive and it's hard to do. But if there's somebody that you can nominate to come onto the show next, who's that person that you're like, you should talk to this person, or this would be really cool for you to have this person on the show? Something come to mind?
I think you should have Joshua Davis come on to talk about generative art.
Okay.
I think that would be...
I can make that happen. He's already on my list, so...
I think he would be a good person to sort of like help give some sort of like context to how that's kind of like evolved to where it is now.
Mm-hmm. He was doing his art before we were doing it. Like in that.
Yeah,
space.
he's one of the people that like, when I was just starting to get into digital art, seeing his work again, this is 1999, 23 years ago.
45 years ago, 755 years ago, Josh.
728 years ago.
Rapid times 2. Yeah.
But I think his work and his like sort of the idea that he was making this work with just programming. Mm-hmm. Again, this is while I was in school for programming. Was very like such a like crazy new kind of like concept to me. And then that he was giving it away too. That was also very influential on me and very like, oh shit, he's just giving away these project files.
Yeah.
And so I think like sort of, I would love to hear that conversation, and kind of like, I would love to hear like who were the people he came up on? Who were the artists where it was like, oh fuck. When I was like, starting out, although I guess he was kind of like starting out at that time. He's not.
When he was a young wizard.
35. He's only like 5 years older than us, isn't he?
I don't know. I haven't asked him that.
Maybe he's like 50. I don't know.
He's 40.
But anyway, I think
years old. Yeah.
I think it'd be great to talk to him and sort of like how he came up and like what his influences are and what he thinks of the like kind of like state of things today. Especially just kind of, I think it's obviously sort of very relevant with the sort of very recent interest in generative art.
Yeah, and he's evolved into an NFT artist as well, which has been really interesting. And he's also, from my observation, been very adapting to the space rapidly and interested and curious and navigating these spaces and stuff too, which I think is really difficult to do because you have to constantly be hungry and curious of this thing and really understand it and be intimate with it. And this is such a social mechanism, this whole thing. It's like, who do you know who knows what, and how does that work, and then who's doing what? And it's not oftentimes based on the work, it's based on like the timing of knowing the right person, and that's where your success comes from, which could be totally hard for people to stomach, but that's also the case of it. But yeah, you've nominated Joshua. I already had him on my list, so
okay, well, fuck you.
Yeah. No, I had him. That's a good thing. I had him on my list.
How dare you?
Yeah. Amazing. Dude, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Mike. I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you've done for me, also the community.
I'm excited to listen to the new episodes of the podcast. Long time listener, first time caller.
Dude, you've been on like 6 episodes.
Like that's the thing. And actually, that was another thing. Like, I never listen. I used to listen to podcasts all the time. I would love that. I never listen to podcasts now. Damn you, NFTs, you son of a bitch.
Well, I think like if you can get back on the schedule of your lists, hopefully, and get a little bit of semblance of your past self a little bit and readapt to things. And then also like, yeah, and once this podcast comes out, and I'm sure you're going to want to listen to Joshua's, and then it might snowball into other things. But yeah, because that's almost all I do is listen to podcasts and like,
I know. I got to get back to that. I
love that. Yeah, I love that space. So hopefully you have an amazing time making your everyday tonight. Thank you so much for sharing yourself and your time with the rest of us, and also for championing me to come back and do this show. I appreciate that. And it's great to see you again and to do this again. So yeah, perpetuating it. So
there it is. There it is.
All right, babies. Thank you so much.
Peace.